Good evening, I'm Britt Clennett in Hong Kong and welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. A warning for Hong Kong investors about volatile financial and property markets as interest rates go up in lockstep with the US. The development chief says the city could gain more than 2,600 new homes, with 4 residential sites due to be put up for sale this quarter. HKU allows Hong Kong Independence banners to remain on campus, saying students bear full responsibility for them. First this evening, after more than a decade of cheap loans, Hong Kongers woke up today to a new reality. The Monetary Authority raised the city's base lending rate to 2.5% this morning, following the US Federal Reserve's overnight rate hike. Authorities are warning of market volatility as local banks upped their prime rates for the first time since 2006. HSBC made a head start, putting up its best lending rate by 12.5 basis points before other banks followed suit.
As the economy has steadily gained strength, the Fed has been gradually returning interest rates closer to levels that are normal in a healthy economy. We took another step on that path today with a quarter-point increase in short-term interest rates. These rates remain low.
Going forward, interest rate will go up. The impact on our asset market has yet to be seen, but this poses high risks to the asset market. So I would urge investors to exercise caution.
Well, let's dig into the impact and implications of these policy moves. Our business reporter, Joel Flynn, joins me in the studio. Joel, how worried should we be as homeowners about this rise?
Well, I think those of us that are homeowners, Britt, should be worried, quite frankly. Anybody that doesn't have a fixed-rate mortgage will have to pay more as a result of this base rate rise. Now, when you think about the cost of homes, £10 million, a 12.5 basis point increase actually turns out to be a lot of money. And a lot of these people that have taken out these mortgages, particularly at the lower end of the scale, are very heavily over-leveraged. Hong Kong has a big problem with consumer debt right now, and a lot of people will be looking at this base rate rise as a problem for their end-of-the-month pay packets. One of the issues, of course, is that these lower middle-class guys have also ended up taking a lot of their money from non-banking firms as well, so the lending rates themselves are actually higher. And further down the line, people will also be thinking about things like negative equity, which is, of course, when people's mortgages, their loans, end up being worth more than the actual cost of their houses. Now, we're not saying that people are in that position yet, but certainly when you look at the rises in interest rates that we've seen before and the potential impact on people's mortgages, that is something that people will be thinking about now.
And I think the question then becomes, could this be the tipping point for the housing market?
Well, look, I mean, as far as Hong Kong's housing market is concerned, there's lots of different things at play right now. We have a slowdown in the Chinese economy. The RMB has weakened significantly over the last year or so. And then we have this interest rate rise just coming in now. And, of course, that's coming in just as the government is trying to introduce its own cooling measures. Now, the HKMA has in itself been trying to tighten lending restrictions around mortgages. That's because it wants to try and decrease the number of risky mortgages that are coming out. That's people who may not be able to afford the sort of money that they're taking out. When you add that into this vacancy tax, which hasn't come in yet either, all of that looks like it could be this perfect storm of things, and the interest rate rise could be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Right, watch this space indeed. Thanks very much, Joel, for that. All right, staying with the theme of property, the government is putting 4 plots of residential land up for sale in the third quarter. Now, that's expected to produce more than 2,600 flats. The sites are located in Tai Po, Lantau and Kai Tak. The developer who wins the bid for the Tai Po site will be required to build an elderly person's home there that will house 100 senior citizens. The development chief insists the government will continue to focus on providing public housing for now.
There's a site on Anderson Road, providing about 1,160 flats. Originally, it will be put out for tender. The decision has been made that it will be used to provide public housing. Coming back to private housing, we will do the best we can in the remaining time of this year to provide the supply.
Meanwhile, the head of the government's Land Supply Task Force says he's confident about presenting a majority view of all the opinions collected during the 5-month-long public consultation. Stanley Wong said his team is psychologically prepared to engage in some intense debates to reach a conclusion, but he did not rule out a delay in submitting the final report. That deadline is the end of this year. Wong added that he believes the government will accept the recommendations made by the Land Search Committee.
If the government, after taking into consideration other policy issues and does not take forward some of the recommendations that were made in our recommendation report, I think the government would then owe an explanation to the community.
Former lawmaker Wong Yip Man has won an appeal against his common assault conviction and sentence. He had been given 2 weeks behind bars for hurling a water glass at former Chief Executive C.Y. Leung in Ledgeco in 2014. Wong called the ruling a win as he walked out of the High Court today. In reviewing the case, the judge decided there wasn't enough evidence to show Wong had intended to attack Leung. In response, C.Y. Leung said he hopes this ruling won't encourage copycat actions. Well, despite the government and Beijing's attempts to clamp down on independence advocacy here in the city, it seems the debate isn't losing steam. Independence banners have been seen at the University of Hong Kong and the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Written in both Chinese and English, they also expressed support for the Hong Kong National Party, which was banned just a few days ago. HKU says the banners are placed on its student union board, so it won't pull them down. The union, meanwhile, insists the banners haven't broken any rules and will remain as they are. However, similar banners were torn down at PolyU. Turning to the indecent assault case against a Hong Kong athletics coach, where the victim wrapped up her testimony at the Fanling Magistrates Court today. Identified as X, she was grilled by the defence over social media posts after the alleged assault, such as photos of her and the coach and her calling him cute. She explained the coach was like a witty uncle to her and other students and that she had not thought of him as a pervert at the time. Asked why she didn't report the incident for 9 years, X said she was scared and had no one to turn to until the Me Too movement emerged online. All right, coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Well, as expected, those interest rate hikes shook up markets in the region. The Hang Seng tumbled more than 1/3% to end the day at 27,715.67 points. Hang Seng Bank emerged as a winner of the day, gaining more than 2.1%. Over the border, the Shanghai Composite was also in the red today, falling more than 0.5% to close at 2,791.7 points. Tech shares and telcos led the plunge. To other business news now, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has called for a win-win economic relationship with the US after President Donald Trump agreed to start talks on a bilateral free trade agreement. Michelle Hennessy reports.
They'll continue to do very well. We're going to have a really great relationship.
US President Donald Trump finding a trading ally on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly Wednesday as Japan agreed to enter two-way trade talks. After negotiations stalled last year, Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe have agreed to seek a breakthrough. It comes as Trump looks to make good on a campaign promise to level the trading playing field. And Abe may already have scored a win from the president: protection for Japan's car makers. As part of the deal, autos would be exempt from tariffs, at least for now. That would have been a major threat to Japan's export-driven economy. Nearly 2/3 of its $69 billion trade surplus with the US comes from exported cars. Abe also mentioned the billions of dollars in investments and jobs created by Japanese companies in the US, which he said were built on the spirit of free trade.
A win-win economic relationship must be created, and that, I think, is the agreement that we reached today.
Abe also stressed the talks were not a free trade agreement. Instead, it's being called a trade agreement on goods. That means Tokyo gets to avoid rules on investments and services. However, the US already appears to be going full steam ahead. US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer told reporters he's aiming for a full-fledged free trade deal with Japan. He says he'll begin consultations with Congress as early as Thursday.
Well, as Japan makes headway with Trump's White House, Canada is getting the cold shoulder. The US president revealed he rejected Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's request for a meeting this week. Trump said that he thought the ongoing NAFTA talks were going poorly and that he was unhappy with Canada's negotiators. He also repeated a threat to impose tariffs on Canadian autos. Later, Trudeau's spokeswoman said the Prime Minister didn't initiate anything with Trump. Well, trade is on the agenda for the EU and China as well. European trade officials are set to travel to Beijing next month for talks with their Chinese counterparts. According to the EU ambassador, the October 9th meeting will focus on ideas for reforming the World Trade Organization. WTO member states have been under increasing pressure to reform the body since Trump took office. Trade frictions with the US, as well as weakening domestic demand, are taking a toll on China's industrial firms. Data out today showed profit growth for the sector slipped to a 5-month low. So although industrial firms are expanding, their momentum is certainly cooling. Analysts say the mainland's efforts to curb corporate debt and a crackdown on risky borrowing are some of the factors at play. All right, time for a break now, but do stay with us. Up next, the raging war of words at the United Nations. Donald Trump levies more accusations against Beijing, saying the mainland government is trying to meddle in upcoming midterm elections.
One world, infinite visions. View TV 6. Take a trip to the land down under. Behind every native animal surviving in the wild.
Can we talk about this?
Or the furry babies living in different households.
This is a massive open gash. I don't think at positioning it's too bad.
There's a dedicated veterinary team.
That's just such a good result.
Because animal lives matter.
Look after my girl.
Thank you so much.
Bondi Vet. Friday, Saturday and Sunday night at 8 on View TV 6. The hottest local news, trending international stories, weekly review, topics that affect our communities, in-depth analyses and opinions. All that you need is in one place. Weekly review. Sunday night at 9 on View TV 6. No food.
Need some food.
No shelter.
I have to build up my shelter.
No fresh water.
There we go. I need this.
No tools.
This I can make use of.
No camera crew.
There's just not enough to gather here. There's not enough to hunt.
Just one man alone in the wilderness, surviving. Survivor Man. Wednesday night at 8:30 on View TV 6.
In the enchanted land of Equestria, Unicorn Twilight Sparkle and her pony friends take on the adventure of a lifetime. Together they face exciting challenges that they've never had before and discover the elements of harmony with honesty, kindness, laughter, generosity, loyalty, and magic. The main six learn about the most powerful magic of all, friendship. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Tonight at 7:30 on View TV 6.
Welcome back. US President Donald Trump appears to be taking no prisoners at the UN. At a Security Council meeting last night, he claimed China was seeking to meddle in the upcoming congressional elections. The US leader also lashed out at Iran, saying it and Russia were responsible for the bloodshed in Syria. Our correspondent in New York, Jade Barker, sent us this report.
On Wednesday, he chaired a UN Security Council meeting. The theme of that was meant to be completely focused on nuclear non-proliferation, but in a surprise move, Trump used part of his address to lash out at China and accuse China of trying to meddle in the upcoming US elections, the midterms coming up in November. He said that China doesn't want to see himself or his Republican Party succeed because he is the first US president to challenge China on trade issues. Of course, this comes as both countries have been ratcheting up their tit-for-tat trade tariffs. Now, the Chinese foreign minister also addressed the UN Security Council meeting and he rejected those charges. So no doubt this is not going to help the US-Chinese trade tensions. Now, a few other key issues that were in the spotlight or continue to be in the spotlight here at the United Nations is Iran and North Korea. And once again, it's US President Donald Trump that's really setting that agenda. He spoke about both of those at that UN Security Council meeting and also at an extensive press conference that he held towards the end of the day on Wednesday. At that press conference, he said that he believes that Iran will come back to the negotiating table to make a deal with the US. And he also said that he believes there's no need to rush on making a deal with North Korea. Earlier, Trump had indicated that he believes that he will be meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sometime soon. The US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also met with North Korea's foreign minister on the sidelines of the UN, and he did confirm that he's going to be going to Pyongyang again next month to prepare for a second summit between Trump and Kim. Now, this Thursday, Pompeo himself will also be chairing a UN Security Council meeting, and that is expected to be focused on the subject of North Korea. So no doubt we'll continue to hear more on that here at the United Nations.
Well, Beijing this afternoon responded to Trump's claims, saying it doesn't interfere in other countries' internal affairs. It also urged the US to stop doing things that damaged relations with China. Our mainland correspondent, Samantha Vardas, has the details.
Well, US President Donald Trump really picked a fight with China at the UN over political influence and trade, and you didn't really have to look much further than Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's body language during the speech to see how that went down. Now, what's noteworthy is that Trump made no reference to suspected Russian meddling in the 2016 US election, nor did he provide any evidence for his claims about China. But a senior official has reportedly said that the US plans to detail the allegations next week. Now, elaborating on his charge at the UN, Trump later said that China had placed propaganda ads made to look like news articles in an Iowa newspaper.
China is going and attacking the Farm Belt, our farmers. They're attacking our industrial with ads and with statements that don't look like ads. It looks like they're editorials, and they're not. They're made up by China because they don't want me to get elected because this has never happened to them.
Trump also later described Chinese President Xi Jinping as a friend, prompting a reporter to ask how that could be the case given the allegations of meddling, to which he replied, "Maybe he's not anymore, I'll be honest with you."
In other news, the real identity of one of the two men accused of being behind the Novichok attack in England earlier this year appears to have been uncovered. According to UK media reports, the wanted man is Anatoly Vladimirovich Chepiga. The 39-year-old is believed to be a decorated colonel who was made a hero of the Russian Federation in 2014. British police had named the pair during their investigations, but said the suspects had probably used aliases to enter the UK. Moscow has yet to respond to the recent revelation. The Kremlin has long denied any links to Russian President Vladimir Putin. US Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh will testify before a Senate committee later today amid multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. 3 women have now come forward accusing the would-be judge of aggressive sexual behaviour in the 1980s. Kavanaugh has denied all the allegations and said he would defend himself in the Capitol Hill hearing. One of his accusers is also set to testify to senators. The scandal has injected much uncertainty into Kavanaugh's bid for a lifetime appointment to the US's highest court. And in the Middle East, Syrian mainstream rebel groups seem confident that their jihadist rivals will comply with a buffer zone plan in Idlib. Under a recent Russian and Turkish deal, so-called radical militants will be required to withdraw from a new demilitarized zone by mid-October. Idlib is the last major enclave of opposition fighters in Syria. Bashar al-Assad's regime is determined to reclaim the province and was expected to launch an army offensive before the Russian-Turkish agreement. Elsewhere in the region, after years of delay, Israel's high-speed train connecting Jerusalem and Tel Aviv is finally open. But the convenience that comes with the transport link has added to the hostility with Palestinians as the rail line cuts through the occupied West Bank. Lucy Fielder has more.
This week saw the maiden voyage of a high-speed rail line that connects Jerusalem to Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport. For some, it's a shorter commute. For others, not much to show for $2 billion and 2 decades of work. But for Palestinians, it's another Israeli attempt to turn occupied land into annexed land.
The project took a long time to complete because of various funding issues and governments over the years that have had second thoughts about whether they even wanted this line in the first place. The Palestinians have complained that Israel has built the line on land that runs partially through the West Bank, land that they want for their future state.
Palestinian officials accuse Israel of using the train line to create a permanent and illegal footprint on the land, similar to their criticism of Jewish settlements constructed in the West Bank.
Where this train is for the use of Israelis only, so they cannot use the pretext that they've confiscated Palestinian land or they've built this train in order to serve the Palestinians, because it serves purely the Israelis as part of the system of annexation and the system of apartheid in Israel.
And Palestinians are largely barred from using Ben Gurion Airport in the first place. They have to cross into neighbouring Jordan and fly from Amman instead.
It's very sad. You see a railway and see modern technology on your land and inside your land, and you can't use it or benefit from it.
On a test run last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it a historic moment for Israel.
All right, time to switch gears and get the latest sports headlines. Starting with football, and a brilliant cameo by Chelsea's Eden Hazard ended Liverpool's 7-game winning streak. The Blues came from behind to win 2-1 and move into the 4th round of the League Cup. Former Chelsea striker Daniel Sturridge put the Reds in front just before the hour mark, but Emerson then levelled for Chelsea, and Hazard, who came on as a second-half substitute, fired into the far corner 5 minutes from time to seal victory. In Spain's La Liga, champions Barcelona slumped to a shock 2-1 defeat against bottom club Leganes, while Real Madrid were also beaten 3-0 by Sevilla. It's the first time since 2015 that Spain's 2 biggest clubs have lost on the same day. Felipe Coutinho put Barca ahead after 12 minutes, but the Catalans conceded 2 goals in just over 68 seconds. Real could have moved 3 points clear at the top of the table, but the European champions were outclassed by Sevilla. Barca remained top of the table on goal difference, locked on 13 points with Real. In Germany, Borussia Dortmund crushed promoter Nuremberg 7-0 to move into second place in the Bundesliga. Jacob Bruun-Larsen opened the scoring before captain Marco Reus doubled the lead with a thumping strike just after the half-hour mark. The winger grabbed another goal after the break before the hosts scored 4 more times to lift them to 11 points, narrowing the gap on Bayern to 2 points. In cycling, Australia's Rohan Dennis dominated the field to win the men's elite individual time trial at the World Championships in Austria. The 28-year-old beat last year's winner, Dutchman Tom Dumoulin, by 1 minute 21 seconds.
I was considering a bit of a victory sort of salute, but I wanted to make sure. It's you're never sure until Tom does cross the line, and there's a lot of people I have to thank for this, and the first one's my wife. She's back at home, and I'm sure she's pretty happy at the moment.
All right, that's it for now. We'll catch you later.